Okay, sorry for keeping anybody waiting. I'll call this meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order at 5:33 p.m. We'll now take a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Looks like we switched that in the roll, so we'll do the roll next. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All righty. Ms. Fromm, will you please call the roll?
Present. Mr. Allens?
Here.
Ms. Mohammed? Mrs. McCulloch?
Here.
Mr. Siegel?
Here.
Mr. Connor? Ms. Stanford?
Here.
With 5 present, 2 absent, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we go any further, thank you, Connor Childers. Connor works behind the scenes to produce the board's broadcast on Channel 20. And I do want to remind all the board members that we'll hold our questions until the end of each of the presentations. There are a set of meeting minutes from 5/3/22. Does anybody have any changes, corrections, or additions to the minutes? They were in your packets to look at over the weekend. Seeing, oh, Miss Pearson? No. Okay. But you can leave it on because you're next. So, Ms. Pearson, I'm going to give you the floor to lead the Internal-External Stakeholders Committee portion of the meeting.
Thanks, Jude. I was actually ready for the roll call. Nonetheless.
We did.
Okay. I was reading. Thank you. So the Internal-External Stakeholder Committee, we're going to focus on the 12-month agenda. And you see that you can also locate this agenda on our web or on our web or board docs. For June, celebrating RPS 205 Vibe feature, legislative news, internal, external news, community relationship news, a board calendar, our ESSER update that's coming in July, and listening session. So this is June and July.
No.
Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. So on Wednesday, May 25th, Family and Community Engagement and cooperation with College and Career Readiness hosted the annual RPS 205 Volunteer Celebration. The festivities were held at the Standard on State and included food and live music by several of RPS 205 teachers and staff. All RPS 205 volunteers were invited, including RABA and athletic volunteer coaches, PTO, and community partners such as Rotary Club and Pathway sponsors. Rockford Public Schools could not function without its volunteers, and this is a way that we let them know how much we appreciate them. The annual cardboard canoe race held at Lovings Lake is a capstone experience for students in the engineering pathway at all 5 RPS high schools to design, engineer, and build a canoe out of cardboard and duct tape. That takes skill. Students are judged on the presentation of their canoe, their engineering design, and notebook. Their designs are then put to the ultimate test when they race their canoes in the water. Let's take a look at this year's cardboard canoe race held on May 20th. We have a video clip for you. think they deserve a round of applause. That is a perfect example of knowing how to build a team and be a team player. Congratulations to all of the students for a well-done job, a job well done. And thanks to all the RPS 205 staff and volunteers who came together to make this a fun and successful event. 205 Vibe. The 205 Vibe is where we tell the district stories, reporting about the items that are most viewed, gives a peek into the content that what our families care most about. This type item for both last week and this week is a reminder of the last day of school. Our upcoming podcast features our new director of athletic activities and program development, Dawn Williamson. Look for that to be published in the next few weeks. We also encourage you to read the blog post, STEM Night, Success at the Westview Elementary School. There is a video you can watch as well. It is that time of year. Graduation begins this Friday, June 3rd, with Roosevelt Community Education Center. All the graduations will be held at Guilford High School. Details are being communicated to our families. For more information, please contact Jody Scow, I believe. We look forward to celebrating this year's senior class and all their hard work. Congratulations to class 2022. Can we pause for an applause? Thank you. Thank you very much. Specifically to those who studied so hard to pass the Constitution of the United States. Now we have the board calendar. We want to remind you once again that the board calendar is located on Board Docs, full of opportunity to engage with our school and community. One opportunity we would like to bring to your attention is the Rockford Association for Minority Management, also known as RAM, 41st Annual Scholarship Award Ceremony being held on Friday, June 17th at Tabala. More information can be found on board calendar. Another event we would like to highlight is Juneteenth. The Rockford Juneteenth celebration is a celebration for all races, commemorating the day the slaves were freed in the South. This year's Juneteenth celebration is taking place June 18th through 19th at Mississippi. Visit the board calendar for more information. Thank you. Any questions?
No, but I'd highlight the retiree dinner also. That's this Friday night. How many retirees will we be honoring? Could somebody share?
Yeah, we have right now 20 retirees that are signed up for the dinner on the 10th.
We have 20 signed up, and how many retirees do we have?
Off the top of my head, not somewhere in the 40s.
About half. Okay. No, great job. Thank you, Ms. Pearson. Did Ms. Muhammad have something?
You're welcome. So I took the lead this week, so we'll be alternating. Thank you.
Yep. All righty, thank you. So we'll move on to the Performance Monitoring Committee, and Ms. Stanford, I'll give you the floor. You have a long list.
Okay. There's one board policy revision on tonight's agenda for the board's consideration. The administration is seeking to amend Board Policy 4.32, Operations Tax Abatement, to reflect that the board will be updated by the superintendent or his designee annually instead of biannually on tax abatements. Does anyone have any questions on the revision of this policy? David?
So do tax abatements work at all like your property tax bills where they do an assessment every 2 years? And was that why we had been doing a biannual report on those?
I'm not sure why they were doing them twice a year, but the assessments only change potentially one time a year. And so we're just tying it in with the annual assessment cycle.
And they were doing it every 2 years, weren't they?
Well, they're actually in a process, depending on where they're at in the city, they actually will assess different property in different years. It's not like the old quadrennial system where they just did them once every 4 years. They've actually gotten sophisticated enough where they're doing certain properties, you know, throughout the area on an annual basis.
And we had previously been reporting twice.
They're reporting twice a year, but they can only actually qualify, you know, to get it changed once a year when the annual assessment process happens. So we were just tying it in with the annual assessment cycle.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. The last item for performance monitoring tonight is the preview of consent agenda items. We have a long list, and is there any item that board members would like to have discussion about? Ms. Pearson?
Yes, June, if I can have just one moment.
Sure.
Thank you.
Could I ask?
Yes,
While she's looking, Reading Horizons Elevate, I think, is an important piece that we should have a conversation about or hear more about. And the change with YSN Youth Network. If we could, I'd ask for more information on both of those.
Sure. So Reading Horizons Elevate is the companion program to Reading Horizons Discovery. Reading Horizons Discovery is what we use in grades kinder, first, and second, and almost all third grade classrooms across the district. Reading Horizons Elevate picks up as an intervention primarily grades 4 and above. It is used all the way through middle school and high school. Specifically, this is for 4th and 5th grade students who are still lacking some skills in foundational literacy, and we've seen an increase in that as a result of the pandemic. So this contract is a 2-year contract. It would be across the district. Teacher training is August 18th and 19th. All teachers will be coached by Reading Horizons during the school year on their implementation. Oh, and then YSN. The real change is simply in the way that we're bringing the contract forward to you. Excuse me. So previously you had YSN in 2 separate contracts. You had the BISs and attendance truancy specialists under one contract with student services, and then you received a second contract as a part of the consolidated contract process for trauma therapists from the schools team. We've combined them all into one contract. It's a 3-year agreement, and it's attached for your review.
Ms. Pearson?
Was Jude, her light still on?
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I do. There's like 4 contracts for professional learning. Are those for these for the summer?
Yes, those are all contracts for the summer.
Okay. Sorry about that, Denise.
No worries. So yes, I have some questions in regards to G. Is this called the Entry Foundation grant?
Yeah, this is $5,000 that's being provided by the entire organization to supplement their uniform program that they have, so that if students at Kennedy, because they are a school that has opted to use uniforms, if you have a student who says spills their milk on them or something like that, they'll have a ready inventory for those students.
Okay, and it kind of ties into the Title I. So I didn't get a chance to completely review the additional Title I information that I was able to locate. So I would like to hear more about the Title I in item H. If we can review.
Do you have a specific question, or would you like kind of review about what the plans are that are attached there?
So yeah, there's a few items. So what the plans are, and how we're using it, and if there's been requests that were denied, why the Title I funds weren't used for the requested items.
I'll do the best I can to answer your question here,
Okay.
kind of on a high level. So what's included in tonight's agenda item is the 1003A plans. So there are two varieties of Title I plans. The first is Title I Part A, and all of our schools that are eligible, Dr. Wolf is going to fact check me here, that are eligible for Title I funding are school-wide schools. So it's that those Title I dollars are for all the students in the school. The second type of Title I funding is Title I 1003A, and that's an additional additional award of grant dollars specifically for some of the lower performing schools. And the money there is either designated for some student groups who had a bigger gap in their achievement than the rest of their school, or for the whole school if they were in the bottom 5% of the state. So it's like an extra infusion of Title I dollars to support students in specific schools. What you have in front of you is just the 1003A plans. And in terms of how are they being used, it's different by each school. The school's responsibility is to write a plan for how they're going to use their money. All of the attachments in board docs show you what that school's plan is. So each of them are going to be different. In terms of having funding denied, it's really important to recognize that when you're using grant dollars, things have to be reasonable and necessary, and there are a lot of different rules around different funding sources and what is deemed reasonable and necessary and allowable use of funds. So that would be kind of a complex conversation, I think, without any specifics, but we do have a manual that kind of leads schools through what is reasonable and necessary and allowable, and then we have some internal guidelines too around menus of resources that are approved. So if there was a particular concern or question, we could certainly look into that, but that's sort of on a high level how we determine how the money's used.
I did see the list, which kind of provoked a thought. So, like I reviewed, there was a school that wanted to continue to use Title I funds, say for instance, a Title I teacher. So my question would be, if there is a need for a Title I teacher, but the principal does not recognize that there is a need for a Title I teacher, or chooses not to use Title I funds for a Title I teacher, with guidelines and protocols in place, how do we gauge the use of the Title I? And again, I understand that we're looking at two categories, if I understood you correctly, but because I saw the one school that was going to continue to use a Title I teacher, provoked a question overall. So.
Sure, it's a good question, and that's really where our departments kind of intersect, so I'll hand it over to Mr. Gallagher to respond.
Thank you. So during the budgeting season, which would typically begin in November of the prior year, that's when the school's team of supervisors will work with their caseload of principals to go through, disaggregate all the data that they have for their school so that they can develop a very solid theory of action of identifying what are their high priorities, their most leverageable areas, and then making sure in concert with the supervisor that they're then aligning their resources and their allocations to those urgent needs that are identified based off of the data and their theory of action.
So not everything that occurs on a day-to-day basis is included in data, correct?
In the sense that not everything could be quantified, I guess so, yes.
Okay, so so the items that can't be quantified, that may be a concern that could use Title I funds, how is that taken into consideration?
The supervisors work with the principals as really the experts in terms of what the needs are within their own buildings, and making sure, again, that they then articulate a theory of action for the concrete steps that they're going to take with regards to school improvement, and then making sure that they're aligning resources accordingly. So, for example, if you had a school that really felt that they needed to address social emotional learning needs, they may identify that we need to allocate money towards, say, a trauma therapist as opposed to a Title I teacher. But we would want those decisions to be made based off of data where we could make sure that we're measuring a return on investment, so that we're seeing that if we're addressing social emotional learning needs and we're aligning money there, that we know that we're getting that return.
Thank you. So in the event a teacher discovers that there's literature that her staff or his staff could benefit from that has a cost to it, how will the district deem it being a resource or a viable something to apply those Title I funds to if the principal have identified this would be a need?
It really depends on what kind of literature you mean. If you mean like a book study, for example, or a one school, one book concept, or whether it's an instructional resource, that answer would depend on what kind of resource it is.
Okay, so this takes me back to the question that maybe it may take some data to be retrieved if schools have requested Title I funds to be utilized for a particular item. Do we track the ones that we don't recommend Title I funds to be utilized for?
Yes, every time we have a request come in, it's considered for three things: allowability, alignment, and accessibility. Allowability runs through our grants department. That's, is it reasonable and necessary? Does it meet the criteria for grant dollars? Yes. Then it goes to curriculum if it's an instructional resource. Then it comes to curriculum. Is it aligned with our core curriculum? Does it support the instructional shifts of the core curriculum? If yes, then the next question is it digital? If it's digital, it goes over to Jason's team and we ask, is it safe? Does it meet all of the cybersecurity checks, data privacy laws? Can it be integrated if that's required? And if we have 3 yeses for allowability, alignment, and accessibility, it gets added to the menu. That way we make sure that anything on the menu is day one ready to go. It's been through all of the process. Now, if there's something that's been requested and it hasn't met those 3 checks for any one of those reasons, we go back to the initial requester and explain why, and then we keep a log of all the things that were previously requested and were not approved.
So that is the data that I would like to have access to.
Sure, we keep a kind of a running log of all those things that are approved.
Okay,
we publish
very good.
it annually.
And so when will that be made available?
We can make it available to you this week if you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. McCullough?
Could we just have an update, since we're talking about Title I, about where we're at with spending our dollars and what our holdover will be? Because I think there were some changes in the rules for how much we could do this next year because of the COVID. Is that correct? I might be wrong, but if somebody could share.
Sure. I'm not sure, Dr. Brown or Dr. Wolf, do we have a latest sort of status update?
Good evening. We anticipate the statutory limit of 15% carryover. Going this year, there was a waiver from FY20 to 21 and 21 to 22. Every signal that we have is it's back to the 15%. In the current total spending, we're still waiting on final payroll checks, et cetera. So I can't venture that, but we have spent everything the schools have requested and encumbered so far. We'll have 15% carryover, yes. I can't venture safe and reasonable. We have summer program going on for so many right now, but I don't believe we'll be able to carry over more than 15%.
Be able to or need to?
Both. Be able to for sure. That would be the statute. Sorry. And where we stand, we still have May bills to pay. We have professional development that schools are doing in June, student programming that they're doing in June, July, and August. And so I'm not at this point comfortable venturing where we'll end up in August.
All right. I asked the question because we have had years, many years ago probably, but where we were skirmishing, is that the right word? We were scuttling around. We were trying at the last minute to spend money because we didn't want it to be more than 15% because then it was a total loss. And so we had a conversation about the fact that we would plan better and make sure that that was spent. And so, you know, not knowing right now when we have exactly 1 month left in our calendar. And also, I was incorrect then that the carryover could be more because of COVID.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
I was incorrect. It can only be 15%.
In a normal time, yes. In FY20 and 21, that cap was lifted, and we could carry over more than 15%.
Okay.
And so that carryover then got redistributed to the schools in the following year.
And 21, 22, it was not lifted. It still is 15%.
Going from 22 to 23, which the program year ends the end of August, that cap right now is at 15%.
That's next year. This year, it's still at 15% as well?
No, we were able to carry over all of our funds that were unused from FY21 into FY22 last June, and then a supplemental increase went to schools in November once we had the final dollars. So all of the dollars that we had piling up from FY20 and 21 were in schools' hands in FY22.
What percentage are we talking that we didn't spend in 2021 because of COVID that went over into the next year?
We would have to do some
You
because
don't have a percentage? That was 2 years ago.
I don't, because FY20 carryover went into 20, and I don't want to give you wrong information.
Right. And that's why I'm trying to be general and not ask you for a number.
Right.
I'm looking at a percentage, and so I'm not really understanding the answer. So, and I asked specifically then 21 to 22 this year. Mm-hmm. Is there also an exception to the 15% rule?
Going into this year, yes.
Going out of it, no.
What?
We won't be able to carry more than 15% over for next year.
I get it for next year. Okay.
But
thank you.
This year we did.
Mr. Rollins?
On 7W, the fire alarm system maintenance and testing schedule, the testing, is that something that we do every year?
The testing is annually, yes. This is a new contract that we're
because this seemed like a good opportunity to ask the question. It has struck me that we've had a lot of fire alarms go off this year, and a lot of them have been because of malfunctioning equipment. Is that why we're doing this?
No, we are required by law to test our fire alarms annually, which we do. And at the time of the testing, if an issue is identified, our contractor remediates that issue. Throughout the year, there are, a number of different reasons why something malfunctions. But it's just in between these inspections.
Maybe I'm just more sensitive to it this year, but it just seems like we've had a lot this year, and that's hugely disruptive to the learning environment when that happens. So is this contract, are these people going to be looking at each fire alarm system to see whether it's...
Every school is tested annually, and any issues are identified and are remediated at that time.
Okay, well, I guess I'll see what happens next year.
Anyone else? That would conclude our business.
Could I back up one? Because of the grant for money for clothing at Kennedy, and Mr. Gallagher said this is a school who's opted for uniforms, and it just brought to mind the question, do we have any schools that are not doing uniforms? I mean, middle school and below, because high schools don't.
I would want to check with the team to be sure of that, but I can get that information
Yeah, just
to you.
send us a note. I'd be interested to know. Probably easier to know which ones haven't than to give a whole list of the ones that have.
Certainly.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, excuse me. If I could also reverse, when I looked at the list of schools under the category with the Title I, there were some, if the school wasn't listed, or and maybe it's just under this particular one, if a school isn't listed, does that mean they don't get any Title I funding?
No, not at all. These are just the plans for 1003A. And let's see, where's Travis? Does it include all schools who have 1003A? Yes. So these are the schools, if you think of it broadly, it's like Title I and then some for 1003A, so not all.
It may not be a bad idea to have a formal presentation on Title I funding. That is a buzzword in the community, and I think the community could really benefit understanding what Title I funding is and what is permitted and what is not. And I think specific presentation that could really be beneficial for the entire community to understand. Thank you.
Well, have we already had the plans come through for 1A? This is for
Part A?
For Part A.
Yes, I believe they came through in this last year or the spring? Last year.
Okay. Yeah. So it would have been nice to put it together with that, but we'll take it anytime. I think that's a great idea, Ms. Pearson.
And just to add, so what I'm learning is a presentation or an explanation given does not necessarily mean that there is an understanding. And it still may be questions after the presentation, but I think that if we just set aside some time for that, that would be a big help. And perhaps if that is, whenever that presentation is going to happen, if it can somehow be known to the public so they can either be in attendance or make sure that they're tuning in to YouTube so they can really hear and understand and get clarity, because again, the two parts alone could be confusing to some.
Yeah, there's definitely some nuance involved and kind of an understanding of Title I. It feels, I think, a lot more complex than it really is. So sure, we'd appreciate the opportunity to share some information. Thanks.
Thank you.
How many schools do we have that are not Title I, the A?
2.
2, right? Okay.
And I did make one mistake. Montessori is a targeted assistance school and not school-wide, so they have just, their dollars go to a targeted group of students rather than all the students in the school. But we have 2 schools that are not Title I.
So the 2 that are not are Marshall?
Correct.
The 2 to Marshalls, okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Stanford. All right. We are on to planning and development, so I'll give the floor to Mr. Rollins.
Thank you. Item A. I guess the background here is this, school districts, like all units of government, use what's called fund accounting, which means that all of our money is put into different funds, different pots of money for different purposes, and the money that's in those pots can only be used for the specific purposes that those pots are designated for. Under both the school code and the implementing regulations, what we can do is take interest that has been earned on the money each year, and we can carry all that interest forward along with any other interest that's been earned previously. We can designate it as interest even in the next year, and that interest can then be put in whatever pot we want it to. And so what this resolution does is what I just described, which is we'll say we're designating all interest that's been earned through today that we still have as interest, and it will be available to us. It's just a flexibility thing. It will be available to us to put into whichever pot of money we think it is best needed for next year. Does anybody have any questions about that? All right, then the next item is, whoop, sorry.
Mr. Rollins, I realize that can change a lot based on interest rates and whatever, but do we have some sense of what that accumulation ever amounts to?
I would ask Greg.
I'd say right now we're working on the projections for where we're going to end up the year, but it's usually, in the working cash fund, which is where this is at, it's usually several $100,000 a year that can then be designated to whatever fund needs it.
Thank you.
Mrs. McCulloch, did you have a question? Or? Okay. Item B is the fiscal year 23 preliminary budget update. I will now turn the meeting over to Greg Brown, Chief Financial Officer, to update us on the fiscal year 23 preliminary budget.
Okay, so the last time we looked at this was April. We're going to continue to just bring these forward on a monthly basis just so you can kind of see how the budget process is evolving. We have made significant progress in getting to a balanced budget for the operating funds. The assumptions are on that first page, and if you scroll down to page 2, you'll see in the far right-hand column that net surplus deficit now is down to about 3.1 million, and we will have a balanced budget when we present the budget in August in tentative form. This is more just a process of refining our estimates of revenue and where we think the expenses are going to come in. We've got a lot of things that are moving around right now as far as like timing of spending and things like that. So we should have those all buttoned up within the next 2 months, but just want to continue to show you the progress that we're making so you don't see something in April that was $8 million to the bad and all of a sudden in August say, hey, how'd you get rid of an $8 million deficit in 4 months? So this is just kind of that continuous reporting back on how the budget process is going.
Mrs. McCulloch?
I see it's not attached. After I read through this, I had asked if you would, and so you could just send it to us, but the FY22 budget summary in the same format, I was just trying to compare last year to this year, and it would have been helpful. So I'd asked for that to be attached, but if
yeah, we are working on putting that together. We just didn't have the updated numbers for May yet, and so.
Well, this was really more what we voted on last year. This wasn't where you landed into this part of the year. I was very clear about that. I just wanted to see what we passed last year compared to what we're passing this year.
Okay. All right.
So yeah, I didn't mean to, that's why I said I didn't want to cause you that extra work.
Okay, yeah, I misunderstood that. Yeah. I thought you wanted an update on the FY22 expenditures to date so you could see where we were at, kind of budget to actual.
Well,
so
I'm
that
sure
was,
we'd all like
that was
that
my
as
fault.
well, but.
So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? On the topic of the budget, I want to say I got my real estate tax bill a couple of weeks ago, and for the first time in a long time, my taxes went down, and not because my assessment went down, but because EAV has gone up in the district, and we've kept our levy along with a lot of other taxing districts. So I was pretty happy to see that. We've been working hard to do that, and it's finally having an effect. Next item, there will be another update at our July Committee of the Whole. Next item is on the physical security assessment. I mentioned this at, I think, the last Committee of the Whole. The district is building a multi-year physical security plan and requires an assessment from an industry certified expert to identify vulnerabilities for physical, technical, policy, and operational security measures. I mentioned this before. They're not doing this because of what just happened. This was already in process. We had done one of these in 2015. I thought it was longer ago than that. I'm sorry, I thought it was just within the past couple of years, but time flies. So it was back in 2015. We do need to update it. This year's school quality survey indicated students in the schools feel less physically safe in 2021-2022 than in the previous 3 years. True North Consulting is to provide a reassessment of physical doors and hardware, burglar alarms, and fire panels, provide an evaluation of security practices and the staffing capacity to fulfill the district needs, and provide recommendations aligned to industry-recognized physical security standards. Rockford Public Schools will evaluate the recommendations and build a multi-year budgeting plan to address our needs. Are there any questions or discussions on the physical security assessment? Who is that, Ms. Pearson?
Yes. So I'm not sure if this is necessarily the appropriate time to ask this question, but I'm interested in knowing what the funding that we have, or if we can use some of that. The climate of our country where it relates to shootings is overwhelmingly concerning. So, and maybe this question is for Mr. Phillips. Do we foresee, and I think that it would be proactive if we had detectors in the entryway of objects, or somehow that we can scan what is being brought in to our schools. I think that this will benefit in so many other areas if we catch it at the door.
Ms. Pearson, I think I'll turn this over to Mr. Earl Dotson Jr. and Fred Deal, the Director of Security.
Mr. Deal is here, our security expert.
Thank you.
Well, good evening. I appreciate the question. The bottom line is, with the security survey, this is definitely one of the things that we would want to be looked at. With technology, there's updates continuously, and having an industry expert come in and evaluate us where we are and make recommendations, I think gives us a better picture of what's actually working out there, rather than depending on a particular one strategy catches everything. I think this is something that we can definitely build into the budget and bring it forward.
I'm sorry. And you may not have the answer to this, but just roughly, what does that planning look like in terms of a time frame?
So the industry experts will be here in July. They'll start the process of actually doing the on-site surveys, and by January they will have their plan developed and delivered to us. That is something that we would get delivered here in closed session.
Okay, good enough. Well, I'll wait. Thank you.
Okay, this will be brought to the board for approval at the June 14th, 2022 board meeting. The preview of consent items, we've talked about this before, the ARP ESSER grants. There's a list of the organizations that are getting the grants in this round. Does anybody want to pull any of these for discussion or questions? Ms. Mohammed?
Yes, I don't want to pull any of them, but I just had a general question because I noticed that under some of the organizations, they have plans of starting their like summer programming fairly quickly. So I'm just wondering if that's going to impact the amount that we're approving them for. Is that going to be adjusted, or how will that work?
Whose question is that? Oh, there.
Hi. So for those organizations, we worked very closely with them, and most of them have a late July start date. The Rockford Symphony Orchestra, the Art Museum, and the Dance Company are all three working together at the museum campus, and they've adjusted their program dates till they'll be going late July, early August, which by that time we should have board approval, hopefully, and ISB approval as well to be able to run the programming. And then the other program for this summer is Grace United Methodist Church, which we've also built in a buffer in hopes for approval to go through before their program begins. We've adjusted their start times to accommodate that as well. I think those are the only all of the organizations, actually I'm so sorry, all of the organizations going through do have summer programming that started, but we've adjusted all the time so they're prepared to wait for all the approval.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
For it first.
I know you have a lot that you're trying to remember, so thank you for clarifying. Yep. I just noticed, like, for example, with Boys and Girls Club and YMCA, I think June 14th was mentioned. So now they pushed it back to late July, early August.
So the start date in the contract is the board date. The actual start date of programming isn't necessarily the same date as the board date, and the terms are specified like deeper into the contract of when their programs will actually start.
Okay, thank you. It was a lot to sort through, so I appreciate you for, again, clarifying.
Not a problem.
Mr. Siegel?
Thank you. In terms of those three organizations, the RSO, the Rockford Art Museum, and the Rockford Dance Company, it seemed like they had a lot of similarities, including the number of students that they were wishing to help. In fact, I think it was the Rockford Dance Company said that, yeah, they're working as a collaboration with the Rockford Symphony Orchestra and the Rockford Art Museum. Are they looking to serve the same 50 kids, or are they going to have, like doing 50 different?
That is the idea, is that each one will do 50, and then they'll rotate the program. So it's a 2-week camp, and then they'll each serve a group of 50 kids, and those students will rotate the program. Because I asked that exact same question.
Okay. I genuinely hope that they fill this.
Same.
But,
yeah.
And get 50 super excited kids to have this experience. This is definitely the largest per student spend of all of the different programs being suggested. So I do hope that our students get the message and realize the value of it and just enroll the nonsense out of this thing.
We're very hopeful. All three of the organizations have been in contact with families that have registered or have tried registering for other summer programs that we are offering. And some of those summer programs currently have a waiting list. So they're hoping to be able, since we are hoping to expand offerings specifically around music and fine arts, that the families that are not able to, or that are currently on a waiting list for those other summer programs that we're offering, will be able to find seats within their programs.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And I think you said that there would be reporting on this. Will we see how each of these contracts fills out, what sort of capacity they end up getting?
Yes, absolutely. That is something that organizations will be required to report back to us, is how many students are actually attending their programs.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Pearson, you briefly had your light on. Did you have a question?
Actually, it was covered. I don't want to be redundant.
Mrs. McCulloch?
I just didn't understand. There's 50 students that will move between the three, or there's 150 students and the 50 in each will change each week?
It's a 2-week camp, and it's 50 students will be at each program, and then the group will move. So they'll start at like the dance company, and then the dance company will do their programming, and then they'll move to the art company or the art museum, and the students at the art museum will move to the symphony. So they're rotating. It's 50 different groups, sorry, that they're rotating at each.
3 groups of 50.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And they're simultaneously.
Yep.
They're in the 2 weeks and they're moving. So,
Yes.
okay. Thank you.
Ms. Mohammed?
Yep, I have one more question. It just came to mind. So as we continue to get more contracts that are brought to us for board approval, is it safe to say that the other organizations will also be starting like late July, early August, or will that potentially be pushed out until the next school year?
It really depends on what their plan is. A good chunk of the organizations now have programs that are coming in for the school year. Most of the organizations that specifically said we want to start summer and this date, we worked very hard to get those through. We had other organizations that submitted with a very broad, as soon as we're ready, and other organizations I worked very closely with who have said we need a little bit more time. So the majority of the ones, though, I'm looking more towards a school year start time.
Thank you.
Wait a minute. Does that mean all of the ones who are coming this summer have come to us then? This is the last of them?
We have, well, for July, in order to actually start programming in by July.
Right.
There'll be continue to have organizations that will come through, but this is these are the organizations that we were very confident would be starting and getting off the ground this summer.
But the way our governance works, you can't bring any more into us this month.
Correct.
So
Yep.
This is all for this?
Yes, so then the July ones will be for August, yeah.
For August?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I just wanted to add that as legal was working with the communications department, we were clear that there were not to be programs started prior to board approval. So all of the contracts and start dates are subject to board approval before they begin.
Okay, if there's no other questions, these are the ones that are coming before us on the consent agenda for June 14th. There are no consent agenda items for the June 28th, which feeds in with Mrs. McCulloch's question. So if there are any more, they won't be coming to us until July. And that completes the report for the Planning and Development Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Rollins. I'll now present the items from Governance Committee. 10A is the resolution of authorizing the public sale of the former Page Park and Stiles, the properties formerly known as Page Park Elementary School and Stiles Elementary Schools are no longer needed for use of the Rockford Public School District. Appraisals were completed for both properties and valued between $17,500 and $35,000 using the sales comparison approach. Administration is recommending setting a minimum sales price of $26,250 for each property. Are there any board questions or discussion? Seeing none, this will return to us for a vote on June 14th at our regular board meeting. So my consent agenda items are under 11. Does anybody have any questions about any of those items? Mr. Siegel?
Not a real question, but on 11B, the Illinois Association of School Boards annual dues, it's nice to see that inflation didn't seem to catch those. It seems like when I started on the board some years back, it was a good deal higher, so I'm grateful to see that that cost has been held in check.
Well, there's a reason for that, Dr. Jarrett. Do you want to just comment on that?
Yeah, the board president at the time, Ken Scrivano, at the direction of our board at the time, directed me to engage in statewide negotiations, really. Rockford led a coalition of large districts that felt that the dues structure was really disproportionately burdensome on large districts that had a large student population because the funding was based on how many students you had. and it kept going up and up and up. I think it peaked at about $38,000 a year. And fortunately, we received a combination of increased services along with a commitment to hold the line on high-end dues costs. So while $24,000-ish is certainly not inexpensive, they have lived up to their word so far for the first 3 years of that commitment. So the board really deserves the credit for directing me to take that on.
And I think it's interesting, maybe it was said during a previous, but the Illinois Association of School Boards is no longer, after this year, going to belong to the National Association of School Boards. They're choosing another parent organization to join up with, right? Where's Ms. Yoshika, do you know, or Ms. Hoadley? But a percentage of our dues will go to whatever organization they're joining, because that's what was happening with the national.
Okay, it's the consortium of school boards. I think it's something along those lines now, so it is a different national association.
And they will have a different conference. It won't be the National Association.
Yes. So their in formation status right now, I believe there's 21 different states that have joined, and probably more as others are leaving the NSBA. Some of the things that the new association is trying to replicate, for example, is CUBE, which is the Consortium of Urban Boards of Education, I believe. That's part of NSBA, as well as the Council of School Attorneys, which is part of NSBA. And so, and those are really two popular portions of the NSBA. So they are trying to replicate that right now, but it should be up and running by next year.
Did they give an explanation as to why they left the national?
Yes, each state has different reasons. Illinois left because they were not pleased with the governance of the way it was being governed, and that had been a long-standing issue that they had with NSBA. And so when NSBA sent a letter without board input or authority to Washington, that was just further evidence of poor governance from the Illinois standpoint.
Okay. Thank you. All right, seeing no other questions, no other lights regarding the preview of consent items, we'll move on to the petitions and communication portion of our meeting, where we invite the public to make comments. The Illinois School Board, or School Code, requires that there be a time at regular and special meetings for public comment. The board will not respond to comments at this time. If it is appropriate, you'll be contacted in a timely manner by staff in response to your questions. Each speaker will be allowed no more than 3 minutes to address the board. It's not appropriate to address individual board members or individual administrators or discuss matters that would otherwise be confidential in such open meetings. If you look, it's kind of to your left, but kind of in front of you, there is a clock with two lights. On the left is the time you have to speak, and the other is total time, which with I believe we have two speakers signed up. Should be 6 minutes. No way we're going to get to filling the whole time. I do not have a card as to names, so Ms. Fromm will call your names as it's your turn to come up to the podium, and it's probably turned off right now. You probably have to turn it back on.
Mr. Ballard?
Good evening to the board. First of all, I apologize for being tardy, but just getting off work. Just want to talk about that we are grandparents and we have a child that's in the public school, 205 Lincoln, and they're trying to expel him for a year. We have our letter. We got a letter on Friday about the hearing that's going to be on Thursday. And I just wanted to tell how disappointed I am in Lincoln Middle School. We have tried to, we go up there more than just for a parent-teacher conference. We go up there for, I'm always up there. When I'm not working, I just make my presence known. And we have tried to talk to teachers. It's probably 2 teachers out of 7 teachers that really care. And we just really disappointed. My wife had more interaction with them with not returning emails, not returning phone calls. And I'll let her come and speak now. I'm done.
Good evening. I spent so much time at Lincoln this year trying to find out some way to get teachers to call me back, to email me back. The counselor, I went to him in the beginning. I need to know about homework. I need to know what's the problem. Where can we help? I got a call back from the counselor once out of a whole year. And I've emailed, texted several times, nothing. The principal, I saw her and spoke to her the first time last week, well, on the 13th. That was the first time I spoke to her or talked to her. It was always someone else. Mr. Russey, Mr. Russey, when we went to talk to him about the Kendrick being expelled, well, I'll go back. When he expelled him, they kept him in the office. This happened second hour, all day. We heard nothing about what was going on until Kendrick comes home after school at 4:30 and gives me a letter. He's in the office, no one called, but this was a serious offense enough for him to be kept in the office. Mr. Russey calls us that night about 6:30 or so, and I said, why didn't I hear about this? Why didn't you call me and my husband about this? He tells me, well, I'm calling you now, but I need to leave because my daughter is in 6th grade and going to a party. What did that have to do with me? I think the problem, the issue with my grandson was just as important as him needing to leave school to go to a party for his 6th grade daughter. That's his job. So I'm very disappointed. I've tried. I know I've been in that school probably more than any parent trying to get some help, trying to see what was going on in this school. No one's calling, no one's email, no one's texting, no one's doing anything except for 2 teachers. That's it. I'm very disappointed. And then when it just comes down to it, then you want to kick him out of school for a year. But I'm there trying to see what the problem is and not getting any answers. So I'm very disappointed. Thank you.
Thank you. We will not comment at this time, and it's an issue with your child, but I'm certain somebody from the schools team will be following up with you. Okay? And Ms. Fromm should have your information that you submitted. Thank you for being here. And I'm sorry you had to be. All right. Do we have any of the board members who have any other business to bring to the board? Ms. Pearson.
In relation or being related to transportation, what does that look like for the upcoming school term in terms of staffing?
So, Ms. Pearson, we are very actively recruiting and trying to continue to build our bus driving team. At this point, we have, as we end the year, we have 176 drivers currently rostered. And we, actively trying from that 176, identify folks that do plan to return. So we are working on that plan as we speak.
Thank you. Some time ago, there was conversation about a company wanting to partner with transportation. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, we work with 2 outside contractors, Sunrise, which typically takes care of our special education students as well as our early childhood. Because Sunrise was having staffing challenges, we partnered with another outside firm, ALC, and they are currently building their staff and currently transporting EC students.
Okay, thank you. So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? We are adjourned at 6:38 p.m.